You're listening to audio from the Decidedly podcast. For more information, find us on Instagram at Decidedly Podcast.
So you guys came over for dinner last night, and I'm realizing that it may be more just for me, curating meals as a host, not using any dairy is a super big challenge. It's like
so my wife is dairy free, and so then you're having to make all these meals that don't have dairy, which I want to clarify for people listening that are maybe not dairy free. That it sounds like no milk and no cheese, because that's what I thought, but it also means no butter.
That's the hard one.
And that's the hard one.
When I started sort of saying, hey, you guys come over for dinner, I'll cook, and then having that constraint put on, which is like a big challenge. I like it. It's like, do this exercise, but you can only use your left foot, or whatever it is. And I never realized that I use butter freaking in everything.
And cheese,
almost. And cheese.
And butter especially.
Oh, butter's everything.
Yeah, highlight to con that is important, which is that when you put more constraint on yourself, you're able to be more creative and more free.
Yeah, I mean, I've noticed that.
You have to cook something, and you cannot use butter.
And you can't use that.
And you can't use milk, and you can't use cheese, and you can't use sour cream, and you can't use whipping cream, and you can't use any of that. You have to be more creative. People think I'll be more free and I'll be more creative with no rules. And that's wrong. You'll be more creative with more rules.
I think that's probably right.
Because you say, okay, well, I want to make something, but I want it to be creamy, but I don't have cream.
Right.
Oh my gosh, now I have to get creative. Versus I can make whatever I want, and I end up making SpaghettiOs every night or whatever. You actually it's more mundane, it's more monotonous, it's less creative because you could do anything you want.
Yeah.
And that's true in business. Oh, well, think outside the box, do whatever you want. Well, no. Let's put some constraints on what this decision has to be. Let's put some constraints on what our objective has to be. You constrain yourself with money. That's a real constraint that most of us have to deal with. Constrain yourself with labor. You could add new things in and say, well, I want to make a project that only works if everybody can continue to work from home or whatever.
Oh, and I used to do that.
More creative.
I used to do that with people I would coach. They'd say, well, this is how many clients I want to get this year. Yeah. For example, I want to get 10 new clients this year, whatever it is. And I would always constrain it on purpose to break their mindset or their preconceived ideas to say, what if you had to get, or you're fired, you have to get these 10 clients in a month rather than you don't have a year.
Yeah, you're going to come up with an entirely different system and to answer that for sure.
Yeah, you're going to brainstorm and think differently about this objective and how you're going to approach it.
Yeah. Well, speaking of someone who I think agrees with our take on that, Dr. Apollo Emeka is our guest today. He's a former FBI analyst and Green Beret who now spends his time helping business owners tackle big decisions. We talked a lot about this and other big decisions that business owners make, how to make a confident decision, the pitfalls that most leaders make when making choices, and why you should avoid goals, which is a topic that if you're a regular listener, you've heard us talk about more, but he gives us a totally unique perspective. So stick around, learn a little bit, laugh a little bit. I'm Sanger Smith with my dad, Sean Smith. This is Decidedly. Well, thanks for being here, man.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
So Green Beret, what's the ranking if you go Green Beret versus SEAL versus like Ranger? Who's winning?
Oh, you're trying to have
the
internet come for me. That's what it is.
Yeah.
You just very out of the gate.
Just setting you up for the haters.
Yeah. Who's the best and who's the worst?
No, I mean, the special operations umbrella is really big. And you named a couple of units under the special operations umbrella. And so there are probably, if I answered that question, there'd be people that would be mad that they were left off the list,
I don't even know what I'm talking about. I'm just saying nonsense.
Just making things up. Well, that is one of the reasons I wanted to talk to you. So you're really an expert in business owner decision making and help people make better quality decisions. But your background is really interesting, coming from Green Beret background, FBI, even a background where your parents pulled you out of school early and you didn't go through a traditional path there. Walk me through a little bit about your background that made you so interested in now business level decision making and coaching?
I'm really glad to be on the Decidedly podcast because I view everything in life as these inflection points that are defined by decision. So even that fourth grade, my parents didn't pull me out of school. And this is a kind of subtle revelation that I came to in the last couple of years. They didn't pull me out of school. They gave me the ability to decide when I would be in school. And so I was 9 years old and I came home in fourth grade and just told my mom, I hate school, just like whatever. I'm going to toss my backpack down and I'm going to
Like
go play
everybody
Nintendo.
says.
Yeah, like everybody says.
Yeah.
And my mom said, oh, well, we were thinking about homeschooling you. And I was like, so like for fifth grade, I could just not have to go back to school. And she said, you don't have to go back tomorrow. And like my little, fourth grade head exploded. I'm like, no, there are rules. What do you mean I could just not go back tomorrow? Like you get in trouble if you don't line up after recess in time, and I could just not go back tomorrow at all. And so I was given that ability to decide. And so February of fourth grade, I decided that, yeah, I don't want to do this. I want to do homeschooling. But then my parents tried to homeschool me, but I didn't want to do that either. I was super hard
Turns
to
out
wrangle.
the issue wasn't school, Apollo.
See, I'm thinking if my parents gave me the decision to decide things like that in fourth grade, my life would have just spun completely out of control.
I would have made very poor choices.
When do most people have that recognition?
The way that I look at decisions, I think there are three kinds of decisions that we make. There are inherited decisions, there are default decisions, and then there are big decisions. So inherited decisions are the things that you are born into. You don't choose what language you speak. You don't choose where you live. You don't choose where you go to school. You don't choose, who you worship or how you. These are all things that you are born into. They were someone else's decisions that you're born into. And that's what most of us experience for most of our adolescence, most of our childhood. We are living inside of inherited decisions that we didn't make. And then you have default decisions. And default decisions are, okay, I'm going to go to college or start working or join the military after high school. Now I have to make that decision. But oftentimes, the reason why I call these default decisions is because, again, they're kind of pre-baked. My best friend, I asked him, what's the first big decision that you made in your life? And he said, where to go to college. And we grew up in the Northwest, up near Seattle. And he decided to go to Lewis and Clark College. And I was like, do you remember how you made that decision? And he was like, yeah, there was a pretty girl on the tour. And I thought, if we both get in, we'll both be there together. And so I accepted and I went to Lewis and Clark. And I guess that girl didn't, because I never saw her again. But that was how he made this decision, and he only applied to schools in the Northwest. So again, it's kind of a default decision. If he'd grown up in Florida, he would probably apply to schools in Florida, right?
Yeah.
So there are these decisions that we feel like maybe even we're making a big decision, but there was a kind of a predetermined path. And then there are what I call big decisions. And these are the things that break from inherited decisions and break from default decisions. And they are kind of truly organic and personal. And by the way, this works the same way in the business world. You come into a situation, typically, unless you're a solopreneur startup, you come into a situation with a bunch of inherited decisions. And most people, struggle to work within the confines of inherited decisions, maybe make some default decisions, but it's really rare that leaders make big decisions that are organic and break from either inherited or default decisions.
What do you mean it's rare that leaders will make decisions that are big decisions? It seems like most of the decisions, once you get into business, beyond that adolescence where everything is sort of decided for you, that you are making mostly big decisions. Here's how I'm going to market. Here's who I'm going to hire. Here's the segment I'm going to, target.
So the way that you can tell if it's a big decision, if you just think of any goal that you have in your life, it could be personal, it could be business related. If you think of any goal that you have in your life, and if I ask you the question, if I were to just snap my fingers, no effort, no time, you were just going to be delivered this goal on a silver platter, on a scale of 1 to 10, how happy would you be? 1, you're resentful and regretful, and 10, you are ecstatic, over the moon, content.
If I could receive the reward with just like magic wand.
Yeah, magic wand.
Okay. I don't know. You were asking me to rate it 1 to 10. I would say like, I don't know, like a 3.
Oh wait,
Most
what's
of the time.
so the goal that you were thinking of?
Any goal, I would be probably a 3.
Why would you only be a 3 if it's a goal you wanted?
Because I didn't earn it.
So you're on sort of the thought process there that the journey is the reward.
No, not that the journey is the reward, but it's like, sometimes the people ask like NFL players who've retired, they're like, man, if you could have gone back in time and like redone your career, made $10 million less, but guaranteed got a Super Bowl ring, would you do it? And it's like such a hard question to answer because in that hypothetical, I've guaranteed the Super Bowl ring, so then it's not fun. It's not a reward. It's not like, I don't know, it doesn't mean anything. If I guaranteed meet my business goals, then they're not like really goals anymore.
So I heard you saying that you do triathlons, right?
Mm-hmm.
So
it's like, okay, guarantee I can run a, sub 3 hour marathon. Well, then I'm not aiming at anything anymore. It's
guarantee like, takes the unknown out.
It's like a superpower at that point.
Okay, so let's say that it takes the normal amount of effort. It takes a sufficient amount of effort for you. If you think about any goal that you have, that's funny. I've literally never encountered this before. So
no,
yeah,
no,
it's super interesting. And
difficult.
No, it's not difficult at all. It's super fascinating, and we're on a podcast here, so I really want to pull this thing apart. But
what do y'all think? Y'all have a different answer? Y'all would say like guarantee I can meet my goals. That's a 10. You're happy about that?
So most people, when they envision their goals, a thing that they think they want to achieve, they go straight to feasibility. They go to 3 words that I eliminate from conversations, which is can, should, and could. That's what people go to: can, should, and could. And so when I ask the question of if we didn't have to worry about how you were going to get there, but you were to get, if you just woke up, right? And let's say maybe that's a better way to ask it of you is that you just, 51st dates, you happen to like get amnesia on the day that you accomplish the thing, and you wake up having accomplished it. And I come back to you 2 years from now and I say, Sanger, how are you feeling? Scale of 1 to 10. You've accomplished the thing that you wanted to accomplish. How is it that you're feeling?
Okay. I see what you're saying. And I guess 10.
So most people, when we go through and we write out the actual goals, and then I put them in a table and I create a column that says happiness scale, the average is about 6.5 when we get down to all their goals.
Well, if you average both my answers, I guess you got 6.
So you're saying then that given the scenario, the mental exercise that you wake up in 2 years, you've accomplished the goal that you've been striving to accomplish. How would you feel about that on a scale of 1 to 10 in terms of happiness? And you're only arriving up to about a 6.5 scale on average, which means that some people aren't happy at all that they've achieved their goal. Some people are.
Yeah, they're like basically 1.5, 2 points above neutral.
It seems like everybody would be on the higher end.
No, and that makes all the sense in the world. No, it doesn't. Like, I think that in reality, when I do accomplish goals, I don't feel like amazing. I mean, you're asking me of this hypothetical scenario, if I could like dream as big as possible and I could basically like have anything, I guess like that day I would feel a 10. I'm a billionaire. Woo. Like that day I'd be a 10, I guess. But afterwards, yeah, it would come down. Any big goal that I've accomplished, I've never felt like as amazing as I thought I would.
Yeah. Isn't that weird? So a lot of what I do is architecting what I call a big decision statement. And it's almost like a run-on statement. It almost sounds like something a toddler would design. And the way that we get there is we say, okay, well, how do we make this a 10? How do we make it so that if you were to wake up having accomplished this thing, that you are just through the roof, excited, fulfilled, and content? And, when folks come to me and they have a bunch of 10s, then I go the opposite direction. And I say, okay, let's imagine that you wake up that day having accomplished this thing and you actually are feeling like a 3. So $1 billion, right? I would be a 10 if I got $1 billion in your example. Okay, Sanger, well, let's say that you woke up and you hit $1 billion and you're feeling like a 3. You're feeling close to resentful. How would we explain that? What are some of the reasons why you might be at a 3? And so the things that I can flip that to you and let you answer that if you want, or I can tell you what most people say.
What do most people say?
So what most people say is they go to things like friends and family. They go to things like health. Well, if I got to $1 billion and I, isolated myself from friends and family, that would not be cool. So whatever I'm going to, in order to be a 10, I'm going to have to define how I want to show up and define relationship in that scenario. And it also wouldn't be cool if I made $1 billion in a way that hurt lots of people. I don't want to be known as the guy who made $1 billion by doing one of the most evil things the world has ever seen.
Yeah, you don't want to be Bernie Madoff, making the money that way, right?
Yeah, exactly. Right. And so when we really start to get into this, what would truly light you up as an individual, that's a big decision. And now, typically, because people are so oriented towards decisions that would make them a 6 or a 7 on that happiness scale, it doesn't prompt big action. And so when you can get teams to 10 from 6 to 7, that's again when you start getting these big decisions where you're not just thinking like, to your point, Sean, oh, well, I got to have some marketing. You're thinking, okay, this isn't a future that we can all see together and that we are like, yeah, this is a 10 for all of us. What do we absolutely have to do in order to make this future a reality? That is what causes people to shift. So typically when leaders come into a situation, they're coming in and they're looking to optimize things. They're saying, where are things now? And how do we make things a little bit better every day? Or how do we make things a lot better? But what they're almost never doing is saying, we want to get to this future state where we're all just excited and enthralled to be in that future state. Now, what are the things that we should stop doing today and never do again? What are the things that we absolutely must do in order to get there? And what are what I call the game changers? How do we identify game changers that would nearly guarantee that we get there?
Okay, so let me ask you a question. The goal achievement framework that I think all of us were talking about, sort of that SMART goal framework, very specific time-based regimen of establishing goals. And so what I hear you saying is that in those types of goals, the typical assessment of happiness related to achieving those goals tends to be lower than what one might think. I say, I want to lose 10 pounds in 2 months and I do it. Okay, that probably may not mean anything once I get there. I'm not going to be ecstatic. But if I've got a bigger goal that's aligning with purpose, in other words, I want to be changing the lives of the people in this community, or I want to be, doing something that is really impacting others, or doing something that is aligning with my sort of core beliefs and values, those types of goals, the bigger decisions that you're talking about, tend to be the ones that would rank higher on an assessment of happiness if achieved. Is that fair?
Yeah. I mean, the problem with SMART goals is that one, when we set them, I'm going to achieve X, I'm going to go from X to Y by this time frame, is that one, they tend to be unexciting. And two, especially, individuals and organizations can have multiple SMART goals that just they don't account for how they may conflict with each other. And so, again, you take a fitness goal, like I want to complete an Ironman in a certain amount of time. One of the things that's going to be required of that is tons and tons of training time. And so in order to fulfill that goal, let's say you have another goal of spending more time with family or spending more time with friends or whatever, that Ironman goal is going to be in huge competition with your other goals because it just takes so much time to be able to complete something like that. So let me make this maybe a little more practical and a little more personal. My wife was born and raised in Pasadena, California, and we met in college at USC in Los Angeles and then basically moved to Pasadena. And we lived in LA for a couple of years, but she was born and raised there. Mom grew up also in Altadena, which is right next door to Pasadena. And the Eaton fires in January of this year, of 2025, came through Altadena, Pasadena, and burned down 9,400 structures, burned down my wife's mom's house. And we found ourselves evacuated because the fires were a threat to our neighborhood as well. And we were at an Airbnb in San Diego, evacuated, and ashes started falling on us down there because fires kicked off in San Diego. And I was talking to a friend and I was like, man, I feel like we got to get out of the country for a bit. And she said, well, have you ever been to Panama? I was just there and it's amazing. I was like, no, I've never been. And I got off the phone with her and I just Googled some stuff about Panama, looking for deal breakers, really. I was like, tsunamis in Panama, safety, Panama. And couldn't find any deal breakers in the first 20 minutes of Googling. And so I went into my wife in the Airbnb and I said, are we supposed to move to Panama? And she said, maybe. And 30 days later, we were there in Panama. So that's where I am now. We moved from Pasadena to Panama, made this big decision. In about 48 hours is when we were kind of crafting the decision and, okay, what is it that we want in our lives? And then once we were able to craft that, then we were able to just take almost a template over the globe, and Panama won out. And then it just became kind of a 28-day execution sprint of getting from Los Angeles to Panama. But we front loaded all the thinking and the decision making in about 2 days. And then the rest of it, the choices that we had to make in order to make it happen were obvious because of the scale and time frame of what it was that we were trying to pull off.
What types of framework did you set up to make a decision? That seems like an incredibly big decision to have been made in a really short period of time. What sort of framework did you follow to be able to do that?
Before I was on the special forces side of the house in the military, I was a military intelligence analyst and officially got my GED. And at 17, and my dad signed for me to go into the military. And the first academic program that I ever graduated from was military intelligence school. And there you are taught to basically provide two things: the most likely thing that the enemy could do and the most dangerous thing that the enemy could do. And so that's hardwired into my brain, is to look for, okay, we have this objective. And in this objective, what is the most dangerous thing that could happen? And what is the most likely thing that will happen? So when I'm really excited about an idea, I try to break it. I'm trying to break that idea. And if I can't find a good reason to break it, meaning that if I can identify the most likely bad thing that would happen, and I can either mitigate it or live with it, or I can identify the most dangerous thing that could happen and I can either mitigate it or I live with it, then that means that I can move forward with that decision. And most people are not looking for the deal breakers in that way. They are looking for all the cans and the shoulds and the coulds. Well, we could move to Panama, or we could move to Mexico City, or we could move to Barcelona, or we could, or we can, and we could, and we can. And what it does is it opens up all of these loops that have a million other decisions that need to be made. But when you come at things from basically, what are the most likely ways that this could be a bad decision, and how bad of a decision could it be? Then you can basically identify, all right, well, we figured out the worst things that could happen. And if we can mitigate those, then we can figure out all the rest.
So is it as simple as continuing to establish big goals or big decisions that are meaningful, and then looking at how do you break them, and then moving forward sort of sequentially? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, I think that the breaking them piece is the most important at the beginning of a decision. So again, you have an idea. If you can break an idea in 20 minutes of searching on Google, either it really is that dangerous, or you just don't have the conviction to follow through on it. Again, this is like one of those things where you can start to identify, oh, this would have been a 2 if I actually did it. Because getting to Sanger's point, like the journey, I just am not down to face those kinds of challenges in order to get that thing. So it's most important in the beginning to challenge an idea, because I would rather encounter a challenge conceptually, intellectually, in a safe space, than encounter a challenge on the ground where your money is on the line and where your time is on the line. And so, that's how I think about it. Now, once you've kind of identified, okay, can I live with the most dangerous aspects of this decision, or can I mitigate them? Then you get to be creative. Then you get to be optimistic and identify, okay, what do I actually need to do? What must happen in order for me to fulfill this big decision? What if I was able to accomplish would dang near guarantee that I achieved this big thing. So like in special forces training, one of the things that I heard that gets people the most is rucking. They're not able to carry the amounts of weight for the time and the distance that you have to carry it. And there's standard tests, like you have to be able to do 3 hours with 45 pounds on rucking, just on roads, basically. But then in Special Forces selection, it's a 3-week process, and you have that pack on the entire time that you're there. So you're doing land navigation, you've got this pack on your back. You're doing these crazy team events where you've got this pack on your back. And so this was a thing that I tried to break the decision to try out for Special Forces. I was in the FBI at the time. And I said, okay, well, if I can't ruck, then I can't do this. So I went to the hardware store, got a 60-pound bag of concrete, tossed it in a backpack, and had a friend pick me up in the morning, went into the office in the FBI, and then I was going to ruck home. And by about mile 1, I was like, oh, this is hard. And I was going 8 miles. Mile 1, I was like, oh my gosh, this is hard. By mile 4, no joke, I had like tears streaming down my face.
Oh my God.
And I get home and I'm like, nope, I'm not made for this. And so I kind of was like giving up. And I talked to a friend and he was like, oh, what kind of backpack did you use? And it was like, oh, basically just like a JanSport. And he was like, you idiot. You idiot. So he was like, yeah, I'm going to come drop. Again, I was a military intelligence nerd. So like, yeah, I was like, whatever, a backpack's a backpack. And so he dropped off his ruck and I went and I tried it again and it was difficult, but bearable. And so then I trained up to where I was training with 100 pounds and I was trying to hold 11-minute miles so that I knew that those physical standards were not going to tank me. I'm like, okay, if I can carry 100 pounds holding 11-minute miles, putting between 15 and 40 miles up a week at that pace, then I should be able to handle anything that gets thrown at me. And so that, and it worked. It worked. I was out of like 600 dudes. I think I came in like 15th on the tested ruck. And I was just able to carry anything that they threw at me because I was overtrained for that. And a lot of folks, they broke down mentally because they physically couldn't deal with the load.
Have you seen someone arrive at a decision that turned out to not work out well? Really, they follow the framework, and they follow the framework well, but like the outcome was no good, even though the way they arrived at the decision was the best they could have done it.
Yeah, I'd say the most challenging thing is actually making the decision, is actually deciding. I don't like using the term goals or objectives, or I'm like decisions. Decisions create cognitive dissonance in the brain in ways that a goal doesn't. A goal is like a side quest as far as the brain is concerned. But when you make a decision to do something, your brain is trying to reconcile your current reality with the decision that you made. And I think people feel that. And so they're hesitant to decide. So the way that I think about decision making is that there's pre-decision. You're trying to make the best decision possible. You're trying to make the right decision. And then you decide, and then you have to make that decision right. You have to retroactively make that decision right. And you're never going to have perfect information. And so there comes a point where, again, you just have to make the decision. And then now that you've made the decision, that's the direction you're going. And you have to make that decision right. And what a lot of people will do is they'll get close to making a big decision. And then they kind of decide, and they maybe tell somebody. And then someone's like, that's a stupid decision. That's a stupid idea. And then they backtrack, or they say, yeah, I made the decision, but like, it's okay if you keep doing things the way that you've been doing them for however long until we're comfortable with this new reality.
What motivates people to have that perspective? That like kind of passive, oh, well, their commitment to their original decision is very fragile and they're influenced by other people. And as soon as that decision is not accepted by others, they'll come off it in the example that you.
I think a lot of that in the business world and in the work environment comes from good intentions. It comes from people thinking that they are being emotionally intelligent by slow rolling things or by downplaying the impact of big decisions. And so they will, they'll say, hey, we from now on Well, no, they won't say from now on. They'll say, all right, we have made a big decision to go in this direction. And that's it. We're doing it when you want to, whenever you feel comfortable. But we know that like you're still used to doing it the other way. So just like keep doing that. But try though, just try to like do this new thing. And so you've got, it creates, the bigger the team, the more of a yo-yo effect that lack of commitment to a decision has on a team, because you've got some people that are like, hell yeah, I've been waiting for somebody to make a big, bold decision like that. And so I'm going, right? And then there are those other people where it's like, no, but we have permission. I don't have to do that yet. So now you're starting to create these factions of laggards and early adopters, and the decision gets stuck. And so now you're not even getting the kind of feedback that you need to make the decision right, because you botched the announcement, the push of the decision.
Trying to appease everyone is like almost never works as a leader. Trying to get everybody to be happy with what you've decided. I can't think of an example where it's worked out well. Not that you should intentionally try to upset people, but making a concerted effort to go, oh my gosh, I want to structure this in a way that everybody's happy.
Yeah.
Especially in a large organization. Yeah, recipe for those types of problems.
Yeah, I don't think you can make big decisions that are going to make everybody happy. You have to make those big decisions and then populate your team that decision would fulfill them.
Well, yeah,
find the right people that are aligned with what you're trying to do.
Are there other ways that lack of commitment manifests itself? Like, I think one way is I want everyone to be happy, but there's got to be other ways, right, that create a lack of commitment to a decision.
If we're talking kind of on the neuroscience-y side of things, we want to make big decisions with our limbic brain, with our lizard brain. We want those big decisions to be exciting and powerful and worth striving towards. And then we want to think about how do we get there with our prefrontal cortex, with our like intelligent thinking, reasoning brain. But I think that we actually almost flip that. And we go prefrontal cortex and we go all pure logic when we talk about what we're going to do. And we use words like Q2, and we intellectualize the decisions that we make. And then we go limbic on stuff that should just be logical, right? Like, oh no, if that's the thing we want to do, then we have to do these things, right? And so I think that it's not only a lack of commitment in the rollout, but it's a lack of commitment into doing something that is going to trigger, making a big decision that's going to trigger people's emotions. And I've seen it one-on-one with leaders that I work with, where they're afraid to commit to themselves and make a big decision. And so when you start talking about you're doing it for a team or a company, it can be really scary to try to rally people around something that is emotional, but I think that's the only way to do it. So you do the emotion on the big thing and you do the logic on the small things. But again, most leaders, they do the logic on the big thing. Well, we can do this. We had a 5% increase last year, so 7% increase should be not that bad, right? We can do a 5% increase, but it's not exciting and it doesn't provide a solid reference point. If I pick the tallest mountain in the horizon and I say we're going there, you're always going to be able to look up and say, oh, I know where I'm going. If I pick a tree on the second shortest mountain, it's unexciting and it's not a useful reference point for determining if you're doing the right things or not in order to get there. So it's lack of commitment to the decision of saying, hey, starting today, this is the decision, and everything that we do from this point forward is going to be in service of this decision. But it's also lack of commitment to a big decision, lack of commitment to something that's exciting, something that's actually going to move the needle, something that's going to break from just, the status quo.
Well, I think at the end of the day, the big factor we want to look at is, are they accomplishing the objective? And I've come across, I'm sure Sanger, Paula, you have as well, people who are very quick to latch on to what they see as a big decision. What we're going to do, we're going to be the number one company in this town, listen, this magazine, or we're going to make this, the president's circle, or we're going to do that, whatever, that they're going to do. And then you check back with them in 6 months, they haven't done a single thing that's going to move them towards that statement. And what it seems like is what they wanted was the dopamine hit of saying out loud they were going to do the thing. and telling people they were going to do the thing, then they're not doing the thing. Are there personality types that you see that tend to gravitate towards that? And if there are, what do you do about it?
I think it's all personality types. I think that typically when people make those kinds of statements and they're like, I'm going to be in the top 100 this, or I'm going to be in the blah, blah, blah. And they're like, this is a goal that I have. When I ask them, scale of 1 to 10, you're listed in the top 100. How happy are you? And that's one of those things that's like a 6 or a 7, because who cares if you're listed in the thing? Most, they are trying to serve a larger goal or a larger decision. I want to get listed in the top 100 because if I am, then I'm going to get more clients. But most people are not thinking all the way to their big decision. So they get these little things that are unexciting and that also won't move the needle on what they really want. And maybe they haven't even identified what that thing is. So I see that, yeah, a ton. People do that with certifications, with degrees. I'm guilty of that. I got doctor in front of my name because I wanted credibility in the national security and intelligence space. And here I am not in that space anymore.
We see that a lot with clients when I ask them, what's important about your money, or what do you hope that I can do for you? And they have an answer. Everybody has a first answer. And sometimes it's concrete. Not a lot of times it's just general. I want to make more, or, what's important about your money? Well, because I can buy stuff. But it's like they can at least answer. They don't have to think about it. And I think what's interesting is maybe that they don't think about it. I ask that question and they don't go, what is important? Or, what would I like you to do? I don't know. They go, it's like right away, they have an answer. And the answer is kind of about as deep as, I want to be in the top 100 lawyers in DFW, or whatever the award thing is. In that, the only reason you would want that is that it's serving something else, and that thing that it's serving is probably serving something else, and that thing is probably serving something else. And we got to peel like 5 layers of the onion to figure out why you even care about this at all. And I notice a big difference in outcomes between people who are willing to do that and people who are not willing to do that. People who resist the efforts that I have to kind of peel the layers usually don't really have a lot of success. They're less fun to work with. They're not enjoyable to talk to. And the work is less meaningful, but they do perform worse too. And the people who think it through and go, well, here's why I want my business to hit $3 million this year or whatever. Here's why I want to be on that, is so I can get more clients, because if we get more clients of this type, we'll be more profitable. If we're more profitable, then we can invest in this new arm of the business, which is actually what we're excited about, because we'll be able to help people in a different way, whatever. Like when they really have the answer, it's more meaningful. They have more peace. They have that North Star, the big mountain that you're thinking about, and they tend to hike faster and farther.
Yeah. I would encourage you to ask them, like, cool, you want the money for this? Like, scale of 1 to 10, if you got that, how happy would you be?
Yeah, that's a great
1, you're
question.
miserable. 10, you're ecstatic. And, you, I think, just illustrated perfectly why a lot of leaders fall flat, especially in transformations, because this is what you do for a living, right, Sanger? And you're like, I'm not excited. Like, this is the work that I choose to do and I love doing, and I show up every day to do it. And you make me never want to do it again with how flat this is,
Yeah.
right? And so that same thing is happening when leaders come in uninspired. And again, they're thinking about like Q2 or some report or some whatever, some individual metric. What I encourage leaders to do is to be messy in the big decision. I know that's kind of contrary to everything that we've been told about goal setting, but I've done so many exercises where you come up with vision, come up with mission, come up with values. And the human brain can hold about 4 concepts or 4 pieces of information consciously at a time. So if you have a mission that's 2 paragraphs, and you have a vision that's 1 sentence, and you have 6 values, it's impossible to hold all of that stuff in your brain while you're trying to figure out which CRM you should choose. Right. And so when you make a messy decision, though, that says, yeah, I want to do $3 million in my business, working only with clients who light me up while spending less time in the office and getting noticed and recognized in my city with an amazing team. That again is a run-on sentence, but what you're doing is you're activating the limbic brain. You're activating your lizard brain for like, oh man, I can get behind that. That's exciting. That's inspiring. And you're activating your prefrontal cortex to now say, what are the rules of that decision? Okay, so the rules are, it's got to decrease my time in the office. I have to apply that rule to every decision that I might make moving forward. It has to be generating $3 million. Okay, so I have to apply that rule simultaneously while I'm applying the less time in the office rule. And that's how you activate other people's creativity as well. So you just make, you say, oh, and remember our values when you're doing this. Remember our mission when you're doing this. Remember the 25 other priorities that we have when you're doing this one. That is not a way to excite and ignite people. And it's a way to trigger their limbic brain so that they're actually stressed on a day-to-day versus using the prefrontal cortex and the logic brain to just execute.
I think I already know the answer to this question. This is my last question for you. What do you think is your biggest single tip for business owners?
Biggest single tip for business owners would be to eliminate the word goal from your vocabulary. And anytime that you say, I have a goal, rephrase it and say, I have decided that I'm going to do this thing. And if you can't say that with your chest, if you can't really stand on that, then chances are you're not going to do the things that are required in order to make that thing a reality. Or, to Sanger's point earlier, that thing is not that's not the end game. It's a thing that's going to serve another thing that you maybe haven't even defined. So I think just as a very practical thing, rather than, objectives, priorities, goals, just reframe them as decisions and see how that changes how you think about them. See how that changes how you come up with plans to accomplish those things. See how other people react when we say, hey, I've decided we're going this way, or we need to decide to go this way. How does that change people?
That's great. We hate goals over here at Decidedly too. And for kind of different reasons. And so it's but it's very interesting to hear your perspective on it, because I haven't heard a lot of people say that. In our industry, I think a lot of wealth advisors, we're here to help you meet your goals. And I've always had a problem with that because I don't think many people have goals. I think when they do have them, when they're forced to make them, especially personal, they're even less effective than business. I want to retire at 62 and buy $1 million house or whatever. It's like, is that why you have money? So you can do those two things. So I'm very encouraged to hear you say eliminate goals from your vocabulary, because I was starting to think that maybe we were crazy. We're the only ones that don't like goals over here. But now
it's pervasive in our industry. It's all about goal achievement. And it's difficult to get away from. But no, I think, Sanger, you've taken the right approach. There are things bigger than goals, certainly.
Yeah. Where can people connect with you and the work that you're doing, Apollo?
The best place to find me right now is on LinkedIn. LinkedIn is like my TikTok. I love LinkedIn. So Dr. Apollo Emeka. And I would love to connect with you and get into some conversations there.
Yeah, this has been fascinating. I could keep going all day on this. I have so many other questions for you. So maybe we'll have you back and do this again.
Check out Dr. Apollo's TikTok dances on LinkedIn.
Hey!
There you go.
Thanks a lot. My takeaway from talking with Apollo is obviously the concept of establishing big decisions is crucial, but he said something about halfway through our discussion that I latched onto, which was that when you decide, something happens in your brain that is very different than when you say, this is my goal, right? There's one thing to have a goal mentally. There's another thing to say it out loud. There's another thing to write down that goal. But I think the next level of that is to say this, I have decided to X. I've decided to run a marathon. I've decided to start my own business. I've decided to sell my house and move to Panama, whatever it is. There's something that happens internally, And I think that may be the reason that there are a lot of people who are reluctant to make a decision and state it forthrightly, because they know that inherently that there is something that your body and your mind is going to commit to when you say that.
Yeah, my takeaway is eliminating goals from your vocabulary. It kind of ties into the force yourself to decide instead of set this goal, then you're actually more committed to it. I really liked what he had to say there at the end on that. Yeah.
Thanks for tuning in to this week's episode of the Decidedly podcast. To be notified when new episodes are released, be sure to subscribe on your favorite podcast platform. And while you're there, drop us a 5-star review because it helps more people defeat bad decision-making right alongside you. For show notes, decision-making insights, more episodes, and links to resources mentioned in this episode, check us out at decidedlypodcast.com. If you'd like us to help you make a decision, leave us a message at decidedlypodcast.com/makemydecision for a chance to have your question featured in an upcoming episode. For more decision-making content, check us out on Instagram or Facebook at Decidedly Podcast. As always, thanks for listening. This is Decidedly.